Let me start on double standards in the pandemic. We have to call out the continuing authoritarian streak of our leaders and the sense that there was one rule for them and another rule for the rest of us. I say this tonight, as I mentioned, from Adelaide, after having made a mad dash here to beat a border closure on the weekend. It's silly, it's unnecessary, but it's all too predictable. With less than a handful of infections in Sydney's eastern suburbs cluster last Thursday, my wife predicted South Australia would close its borders. So instead of our planned leisurely road trip starting on Saturday afternoon, she jumped with the kids on a plane on Thursday night, and I drove over Friday night, Saturday morning. Lucky we did, because by dinner time Saturday, people from our area in Sydney were blocked from South Australia. Now, this is just a tiny example of the pandemic madness that continues to grip this nation. I claim no suffering. I'm just sharing with you my little experience to illustrate the point. The real suffering goes on for others, as you know, people who can't get home, people who missed out on their weddings or had to scale back family funerals, businesses hurt and families divided, parents separated from babies, patients diverted from the nearest hospitals to other health facilities further away but in their own state, people who can't get overseas to see family or can't return here from abroad. All this was made a bit harder to stomach for some when they saw that on his trip to Britain for the G7, Prime Minister Scott Morrison stopped off in Cornwall to visit the graves of his forebears. Now, normally you'd say good on him. It's a fascinating story and he would have shared it with everyone. But this seemed to have been kept a little quiet, didn't it? Because most of us don't get to do this stuff anymore. Yeah, I think Morrison would have been better off either sharing all this with the media at the time or just not doing it. Still, he's not the main culprit on this stuff, as you know, because our closed international borders are the key barrier that have protected this nation during the pandemic. The real problems are the state premiers, all of them except Gladys Berejiklian in New South Wales. And one of the worst has been Annastacia Palaszczuk in Queensland, who, along with her Chief Health Officer, Jeannette, has refused a stack of people looking for humanitarian exemptions for funerals and to visit loved ones and the like. They seem to have only made exemptions in Queensland for movie stars and for sports stars. And last week we highlighted the case of Mark Kilian and his wife Annalie. They are in hotel quarantine in Sydney, unable to get an exemption to travel to Brisbane to see Mark's dying dad, Franz. They flew from the US, they're fully vaccinated, and they've tested negative to COVID 3 times in the past week, yet still Queensland won't budge. Mark's now penned an open letter to Annastacia Palaszczuk and Dr Young, saying, "We're willing to do whatever it takes to avoid risk to the people of Queensland. We've offered to wear masks 24/7. We'll wear hazmat suits and tracking devices if needs be. We'll limit our movement only within the family. We're still offering to fly on our previously booked charter flight to Kilian Airport, which would further reduce the risk to the people of Queensland." Time is of the essence here, and Mark went on to say, "So I beg you, we beg you, my family begs you from the bottom of all our hearts, please reconsider our case and allow a father to say goodbye to his son in dignity and love." Yeah, that's heartrending stuff, isn't it? What is the risk here to the people of New South Wales, more importantly of Queensland? They're in New South Wales at the moment. New South Wales has bent to allow them to travel, but Queensland won't allow it. No exemption allowed still. An online petition the family has posted on change.org now has over 30,000 signatures, but Queensland will not budge. This sort of heartlessness is hard to comprehend. It fails to consider risk in a proportionate way. It's unnecessary, as we've heard from the medical experts, yet we know that the Queensland Premier herself bent the rules to get a Pfizer vaccination in case she gets to go to Tokyo for the Olympics in a few weeks' time. Talk about one rule for them and another for us, eh? And then today, in news that must stick in the craw of those who have been treated so poorly, the Queensland Premier has announced that her Chief Medical Officer will be the state's next governor. The person who has joined in an inflexible and brutal pandemic response, the woman who has helped Palaszczuk run an unofficial virus elimination strategy that has hurt so many people and can't be sustained in the medium to longer term, that person, Dr Jeannette, is rewarded with the plum position of representing the Queen in Queensland. But
people across Queensland have stopped me and have said to me, Dr. Young's going to be our governor, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And I thank Queenslanders for doing that. I'm quite sure that she will be the people's governor, because she has been with the people of this state through the most difficult challenges that our state has ever had to face.
But get this, Dr. Young takes up the governorship in November. So the scary pandemic is so terrible that vaccinated people can't visit their dying dad, but we know already that the situation's going to be fine for the Chief Medical Officer to move on to another gig in 4 months' time. It's been a good pandemic for some, hasn't it? Some people have not lost $1 in income and have even won some plaudits, promotions and exemptions. All the more reason to think about people caught out by their onerous rules. Show some heart. Show some practical competence in the management of risk. And perhaps start by allowing a son to say goodbye to his dying father.